Thanks, Chris. Well, it's great to see so many old friends, and it's really great fun to be up here on the Arctic Circle, surrounded by so many right-thinking people. We are privileged to be among the world's leading experts on the rigging of the gold market by central banks and their agents, plus some first-rate economic thinkers who can tell us what to expect upon the inevitable failure of that rig. Now, I don't have anything to add to what these experts and thinkers have to say about those issues. Instead, I'd like to talk about the way forward for GATA as I see it. I speak as an early and as a longtime supporter and as a direct beneficiary of what GATA has achieved to date in its capacity as what has to be the noisiest and the crankiest educational charity in the history of the Internal Revenue Code. I stumbled onto it about the same time I stumbled onto gold back in the late 1990s. I was on the prowl for a profitable trade. I'd had a checkered career as a securities lawyer, an investment banker, and most recently a carpetbagger. More politely, a private equity investor in emerging markets formerly part of the late Soviet Empire. I was looking for a value or a convergence play with the potential to become another Eastern Europe. Gold jumped out as a natural. There was no market more out of whack then or now than gold. There was even a fat old lady singing at the time in the form of the Bank of England dumping the Crown's reserves. And in retrospect, it turns out, who knows, maybe a little something from some other countries' reserves as well. It's not entirely clear whose is what down there in the vaults. Anyway, as I was reading up on the subject, I noticed that a couple of nutcases had raised the Jolly Roger on the internet. They were alleging, of all things, massive fraud in the very market I was trying to understand. Now, this piqued my interest. I was young and cynical. You don't spend a lot of time on Wall Street or in the adventure capital end of the private equity business without running across rigged markets. In fact, if there was a price-fixing cartel at work, so much the better. A nimble outsider can make good money busting or riding cartels. But as I got into it, I learned the gold market was not like, say, amino acids or potash. Here, the price of an asset was being suppressed, not supported, and not by users, but by owners, and not for obvious reasons. I'd never run into this pattern before. If you own a lot of something, why run a cartel to keep its price down? I quickly came in contact with other people who'd homed in on GATA's beacon. They helped me to understand the bigger picture, that gold is money, real money, and as such poses a mortal threat to the fiat dollar-based monetary system. The preservation of the bank's power to create what we use as money is infinitely more important than the price of a portfolio asset. That's why it was foolish to expect the central banks to act as economic entities. The only reason the banks held on, or pretended to hold on, to their gold inventories was to maintain their control over the market and to keep the exchange value down in relation to their competing paper franchise. This realization was part of a greater intellectual awakening that put the rig in context. The fact is, the struggle between state power and market-based money has been ongoing for many years and has defined, among other things, the economic history of the 20th century. The current rig is just the most recent and the most sophisticated manifestation of this struggle. Now, all this was news to me. I'd received a good education. I'd even spent several years at a bulge bracket investment bank, specializing in financial institutions. But I was completely ignorant on the history and nature of money. Now, this was obviously partly due to my own shortcomings as a student. But it was also due to the fact that in today's America, these subjects are simply not taught in school or discussed in polite company. If you want to learn the truth about money, you have to find it on your own. As an aside, back in law school, I was a class ahead of Judge John Roberts, President Bush's nominee to replace Sandra Day O'Connor on the Supreme Court. I didn't know him. He must have hung out with the smart kids. Actually, there was no reason why I would have known him. We were all wound pretty tight back then, focusing